My name is Kevin Dass. I'm a senior technical consultant for New Frontier Minerals, which is an exploration and development company based in Australia that is listed both on the London Stock Exchange and the Australian Stock Exchange. We are actively exploring for high-value heavy rare earths, uranium, niobium, and also copper in Northwest Queensland.
Excuse me, Kevin. Thanks for joining us. And I think you're up on site today, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Just right in the middle of Australia, not far from Alice Springs.
Very good, very good. Well, look, I appreciate you joining us from site. In fact, what are you up there to do? Why are you on site?
Yeah, look, we've got an exciting project here called Harts Range, and just the last couple of months we've flown some airborne helicopter surveys, which is really bringing up magnetic and radiometric data, and that data has been processed last month, and it came up with 46 targets, which has kind of exceeded our expectations. So the process now, and the reason why I'm up outside, is to really get on the ground and start to validate those targets, and start to do some ground truthing and line them up.
Right. So, okay, you're up at Harts Range. You've also got a copper project at the moment. If I kind of look at the kind of uranium space at the moment, even rare earth space at the moment, most people seem to be steering towards copper. So why the focus on Harts Range first?
Yeah, look, Harts Range is our exploration project, and that's really a blue sky project there. And what we have at Harts Range, which makes it, I suppose, different to all the other rare earth projects, is we have their high value heavy rare earths, in particular dysprosium and terbium. And the significance of that is these high value heavy rare earths can only be found really in China, and there's probably another handful of companies around the world that have these valuable and highly critical minerals that are key for defense and the electric vehicle industry.
Right, okay. And so, because you talk about in your marketing materials uranium, niobium, and the heavy rare earths, I say the more valuable of the rare earths, certainly in margin terms. What's the plan here? It's very early days, but you've got to have a view as to your participation in that ecosystem. Heavy rare earths in Australia, is that worth chasing?
Oh, absolutely. Look, there's one company called Northern Minerals. In fact, it was a former company that I worked for back in 2009. They have what's called the Browns Range heavy rare earth deposit. Very sought after, highly strategic. In fact, the government has stopped Chinese acquisition of that asset because it's highly critical, and really these heavy rare earths can only really be sourced from China. So having sources outside of China is very significant and highly prized. So hence why we're really excited to be exploring for these heavy rare earths at Harts Range here.
Right. Okay. And what's the end game here? Because if I'm an investor, I want to know what I'm investing in. Clearly, this kind of skill set in terms of the processing side of rare earths seems to be exclusively in China at the moment. Very few participants ex-China. What's the end game with regards to this heavy rare earths project of yours, if you can find enough of this stuff to be economic?
Yeah, look, early indications, we've got two primary prospects. One's called Bob's, the other one's called Cusp. And from both of those prospects, we're getting 10, 15, 20 rock chip samples that are, demonstrating very high grades, the rare earths that are in favor. And also, it's consistent. We're seeing those grades kind of consistent across the outcrops, both at Bob's and also at Cusp. So the idea for us and the real value to shareholders is a discovery. So from exploration to discovery is where we're going to get the most uplift. Now, people do ask, how are we going to process this? Look, at this point in time, if we can make a discovery, that's gonna deliver significant shareholder value. So that'll be our primary focus, is to make an exploration discovery here at Harts Range.
Right. But discovery to what end, I guess people are going to be asking about. So if you're focusing on the heavies initially, what do you know today? What have you got? You've kind of quoted some pretty high grades, but it's, it's all surface work at the moment? Is it rock chips? I mean, what have you got?
Yeah. At this point in time, it's rock chip samples, and they're both at the two primary prospects, and we're getting about 30 samples at this stage, and the idea is we've just flown airborne geophysics, and the purpose for that is to really identify as many of these targets as we can, and then later in the year we want to bring a drill rig in and actually drill these targets. So rather than having two primary targets, we want to have maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 that we can have all lined up ahead of drilling, and that gives us the best chance of making a mineral discovery here.
Right, and obviously I'm looking at the markets at the moment. Obviously we'll kind of forget the kind of reaction to the kind of tariff situation at the moment. Is at this moment in time, everything looks bleak, but it'll sort itself out. I think it's the general consensus. But equity markets were damaged long before the tariffs came along. How do you fund these things? Because I think precious metals people understand at the moment. The copper people understand at the moment. Rare earths is slightly more esoteric. Do you think the money's there to do what you want to do? And is it there in Australia, or do you have to maybe look to industry partners? How does this thing get financed going forward?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. Now we've part of our strategy corporately is to not divest non-core assets, and that's what we've been doing over the last 6 months. We've actually divested 3 of our 4 non-core assets, and that's brought in a lot of cash. It's brought in shares, stock. There's bonds from coming back. So that's given us some real ammunition to do what we need to do over the next 3-4 months. At some point in time, ahead of drilling, we'd like to maybe do a small raise. But right now, the strategy's been working really well. And you're talking to a lot of investors, brokers, that really like the strategy because as a junior, you've got limited funds, you've got limited resources. And so, rather than having 5 projects and focusing here, there, and everywhere, for us, we're really going after the low-hanging fruit, which is the rare earths, the uranium, niobium at Harts Range, and the copper in Northwest Queensland. And that's going to be the best 2 options to deliver shareholder value. If we can get one of those to come off, if not both, it's going to, share price is going to significantly re-rate from here. So for the immediate time being, we are funded, and that's kind of where we're really focusing our work on at Harts Range with those funds.
Right. So the reaction has been to the heavy rare earths component here. When you're talking to your investors at the moment, do you think uranium and niobium have a meaningful role to play in this, or would you again just stick with the kind of rare earths component?
Uranium is in Northern Territory, and Northern Territory is a fantastic jurisdiction. If you take out Olympic Dam, the majority of Australia's uranium production comes from the Northern Territory. So we're in a prime location for it. Now, an interesting thing with these minerals that we've got, when you get the rare earths, you get the uranium, you get the niobium automatically with it. They're not 3 separate targets. They're not 3 separate deposits. They all occur together. And in fact, the way that we find these high-value rare earths is by looking for the uranium. And then when you find the uranium, you get the rare earths, you get the niobium. It all comes together in one nice package.
Right. So that makes it kind of interesting when it comes to kind of separation of this further down the line. So, I mean... Crikey. So you at some point will be probably looking for some kind of strategic partner who's got some kind of skill set in the processing side, presumably. And do you think that's got to be ex-China? I mean, what do you think the future looks like in terms of relationships between Australia and China?
Look, I think it makes a lot of sense to be ex-China. China has the know-how, has the money, and is ready to move on these things. But the reality is China controls the majority of rare earths. In particular, these heavy rare earths, all roads lead to China. The sourcing and the processing. And you talk about a strategic partner, and look, I can't mention names, but we've already been approached by a major that is in this area, and there is a lot of interest in particular for our heavy rare earths.
Right, okay. And I guess, right, so in terms of moving the project forward, Harts project forward then, what does that look like? It's going to be dependent on funding, obviously, but in terms of the process of moving from all the kind of surface work through to actually starting to drill, what sort of timeline are we looking at?
Yeah, so we've done a few stages over the last few 5 months, and the last stage that we completed last month was the airborne geophysical survey, and that's just given us a region-wide target targets, and that just allows us, to really target areas, to get on the ground and to line up really for drilling. And so, we want to drill this year. That's one of our priorities, is to drill Harts Range. And look, some of the grades that we're seeing at surface are fantastic, and if we can replicate those through the drilling, then that's going to be, very significant and a real big tick.
Right. Okay. And tell me more about the team involved with this. There's technical director? How did you describe yourself earlier?
Yeah, I'm a senior technical director. So part of my background is as a geologist. I've got in particular 15 years of rare earth experience alone. Including that there's gold and uranium, and there's a bunch of other commodities, and I've worked across a span of different jurisdictions globally. So part of what I'm bringing to the table is an exploration strategy to really identify these high value rare earths, and then to explore and then to develop them here at Harts Range.
Right. And who else is involved in this?
So we have one of the other team members. We have a non-exec director. He's Joel Logan. He's also a geologist as well. So he's actually not with me right here, but he's at site, and he's part of the team, and then obviously the directors. And part of this is, the team's pretty lean at this stage, and just to really preserve cash, but then as we continue to progress, we want to start to build it out with the right people and the right technical know-how. I think having the right management is absolutely key, and it could be the difference between making a discovery or not making a discovery. And again, that's, I think you want to do the geoscience correct, and have a systematic approach which gives the company the best chance of making a mineral discovery.
Right, and talk to me about the valuation of the company. I mean, you got obviously two projects, one Northern Territory, one Queensland. I said it right at the outset, the copper would seem to be the most topical at the moment. Is there any value assigned to that? There is. Okay, so, and how much work has been done on that?
Yeah, look, the Northwest Queensland copper project is located in the Mount Isa copper belt. Now, just to tell you a little bit about that, the Mount Isa copper belt is probably one of the best locations in Australia for copper. I call it the Beverly Hills district of copper in Mount Isa. It's fantastic. We've got 1,000 square kilometres of ground there, and we've got what's called the Big One deposit, and that's about 2.2 million tonnes of copper at 1.1%. For around 23,000 tonnes of contained copper. So there's a small resource there. Now, in January, when you look at our news flow, we signed a memorandum of understanding with our neighbour, Austral Resources. They're a copper producer. They have what's called the Mount Kelly processing facility. So they're producing copper, they're cash flow positive, but they need more ore, they need higher grade ore. Hence, our Big One deposit will be absolutely critical for their operation. So we've just signed that, very exciting, and that gives us a real clear pathway to production, because what that means is we don't have to go to markets to raise $100 million to build a processing facility. We've got one down the road. So that's our development play. Again, like you said, copper's a very exciting space, and that's, again, the low-hanging fruit for shareholders of, if we can develop this asset, it's going to be a really good story.
But what's the agreement actually mean for you? Is there what's the kind of financial component to this now versus down the line in terms of like some sort of DSO arrangement?
Yeah, look, it's very little financial commitment at the moment. So at the moment, the studies that we're looking at doing is, in fact, at the Big One, they already have stockpiles sitting there. There's that have been mined out, copper oxide, high grade stockpiles. And some of those have inferred resources on them. And part of what we're going to do next month is take some of those stockpiles, smaller amounts, nothing too big, but we're going to start to put them through the Mount Kelly processing facility at Austral Resources, our neighbour next door, and start to produce some copper. And that'll be, I think it'll be a real technical exercise, but also a bit of a marketing exercise to show that we can actually take our stockpiles, put it through that plant, and out comes copper at the other end. So at this stage, that is costing us very little money. It's just a few site visits and So it's pretty good bang for buck.
Okay, and the end game there is to try and create some sort of annuity revenue stream to fund work on at Harts. Is that the idea? I don't know the size, the quantum of the opportunity, or the value of the opportunity with the copper.
Yeah, look, I think that's the end game. The end game is to definitely, there's a small resource there, and part of the strategy later is to drill that out to be bigger. There's also another 4 or 5 targets immediately that have copper at surface and IP targets at depth, and that'll be to drill those. So really to increase tonnage over time. But then if we can get the production going where we can start to feed some of this supply, some of our stockpiles to the Mount Kelly processing facility, as you said, it kind of gives us a bit of cash flow to get things going. So that's a really good pathway to production there, and very, very exciting little project there.
Again, give me a sense of the time frame in terms of all the things that you've got to do to get to that point.
Yeah, so look, at this point in time, it'll be really getting to site, making some assessments of some of these stockpiles, doing the trial run, as we said, and then the second phase would be, I think, once we're successful in that, the second phase would be really to look at drilling out the Big One deposit to add more tons. And then secondly, we would look to drill some of these other targets. So you're probably looking at over the next 6 to 12 months for the copper. That would be the time frame. Whereas the priority at this stage would be Harts Range over the next 6 months, where we really want to ramp up Harts Range with the uranium, niobium, heavy rare earths. So there'll be some overlap at that point in time, and hence we'll start to expand the team a little bit more so we can kind of cover both projects. So essentially, lots of good news flow.
No, I hear what you're saying, and sorry to kind of dig down more, but just to understand the copper, 12 months for the copper. 12 months for the copper to do what? Because it's an interesting model in the sense that if you've got something which has a annuity stream of cash, which allows you to expand the potential there and kind of drive revenues there, but more importantly, so this anti-dilutory component where it can fund your work at Harts, it's really interesting. So going back to the question, you said 12 months for the copper to get to what? To revenue?
No, look, I don't know about getting to revenue. Look, we haven't done the numbers on that yet, but I think at this stage, the main objective would be can we put our oxide material through their oxide plant, and we're pretty confident that we can, but again, we need to tick all the right boxes to make sure that we can do that, and we don't want to overpromise and not be able to deliver that. So that'll just take time to do some of the metallurgical test work to work out, what are the oxide areas, what are the sulfides, and what's the material that can go into the plant. Secondly, we need to start to look at a drilling campaign that would be able to target deeper parts of the resource to add more tonnages. And then thirdly, we would need to look at a couple of other immediate targets in the immediate vicinity that can again deliver some really high grade shallow tonnages to the story. And essentially I think we can add value through, if we can increase our tons and we've got a production story and the ore feeds well into the plant, then it's just a matter of time with getting some kind of toll treating agreement in place.
Right. Is there any kind of competitive tension? I mean, is Austral the only show in town for you?
No, look, in fact, that ground is very hot property. We're surrounded by all the majors, Glencore, Anglo America, Rio, FMG, the who's who in the zoo is all there. So, look, I wouldn't be surprised. We saw the copper price go over 11,000 tons US, $11,000 a ton per US recently. It's had a bit of a pullback with recent tariff developments, but again, copper is one of those commodities. If you're going to electrify the world, you're going to need so much more copper. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see a lot more M&A activity, and someone may even come in and tie up that whole region, because you've got a lot of mills, you've got a lot of deposits, and I think there's a lot of synergies there with a bit of M&A activity. You're going to find maybe sooner rather than later some of those things. So we want to really add as much value to that copper story as we can by spending as little money as possible. So if this can be a production scenario in the next 2 years, fantastic. and that would be a great outcome for us.
Okay. I just want to understand that, because obviously your negotiation power increases if there's competition versus the only show in town, which kind of puts all the power on them. So good. Okay, so it sounds like a busy few months, obviously, down at Harts. What do we hear from you next? What's the next bit of news coming out of you?
What we've got is, so the next 3 months we're going to be focusing on Harts. I mean, there'll be intermittent trips to the Northwest Queensland copper to, like I said, to do some of these processing activities. But over the next 3 months, the team are going to be on the ground. They're going to, I think about a week and a half ago, we released our geophysics results, where we came up with 46 priority targets at Harts Range. And it's going to be a case of getting on the ground, validating those, taking rock chip samples, soil samples, getting them analysed, and all of that will be released to the market, and hence trying to line up as many drill targets ahead of our drilling campaign. So next 3 months, lots of news flow, and just coming out from the field, and it's just this month is really the first month that we're back in the field in 2025.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to sort of hearing your drill plans, drill modelling, and targeting. Lovely to meet you, and best of luck with your time there in the field. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matthew.